Gulf winds blow through canopy roads all the way to Thomasville. The native names written on the land echo through the red clay hills, where the scent of longleaf Florida pine reach up on past that Georgia line. Stroll through Tallahassee town or southern Appalachia bound. Take the local routes and journey down the roads we call our home. Take the local routes and journey down the roads we call our home.
Welcome to Local Roots. I'm Suzanne Smith with WFSU Public Media. In this episode, we're going to focus on the historical roots of some important local issues. WFSU TV and FM teamed up to take these deep dives, and were able to do it thanks in part to a grant from the new PBS program called Retro Report. Our first Retro Local story today brings us here to Florida A&M University campus and to the historic building behind me. WFSU Public Media's Lynn Hatter explores the history that is literally and figuratively carved into the foundations.
Historically Black colleges and universities are vibrant centers of education. They hold a special place in African American culture.
Strike and strike and strike again.
At their peak in the 1930s, there were 121 HBCUs across the country. But in the years since integration, these institutions, these centers of community, they've been slowly disappearing.
Second and 10.
That loss is something Florida A&M University knows well. It's lived it before. FAMU is an HBCU that's still a center of community in Tallahassee, but it's been fighting for survival for decades, ever since the closure of one of its most notable institutions. Today, FAMU's Foothillier building houses the school's admissions offices, financial aid, and student account centers. But nearly 50 years ago, it was a hospital.
I did not know that FAMU had a hospital.
No, I did not know that FAMU had a hospital.
I actually did. My advisor, Mr. McCaskill, shared in class that he was born there.
Ed Hollifield's mother, Millicent, was a nurse at the hospital. He grew up to be a doctor of internal medicine. But when Ed Hollifield was a child, FAMU's hospital was the only one that treated African Americans in North Florida.
You've talked to FAMU students, and they don't have a clue as to the role that this hospital played. And as far as I'm concerned, that's totally unacceptable. That's administrative malpractice. They need to know about this hospital, the role that it plays, and the role and how it helped keep Black people alive.
The roots of this social center go back to the end of the Civil War, when schools like FAMU were established to educate a newly emergent free Black population.
You have the confluence of a variety of worlds and segregation and Reconstruction, the Civil War, freedmen, African Americans or previously slaves that are now understanding the banking system and land ownership and independence.
Dr. Nasheed Madyuan is the director of the Southeastern Meek-Eaton Archive on the campus of Florida A&M.
The argument between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington about what takes your path to independence is a higher education or vocational skills.
FAMU's hospital started in 1911, combining the vocation of nursing with higher education.
We as children thought we would be like them, because I thought surely I'd be a nurse. There was no way I wouldn't be a nurse, because they were just simply beautiful to me in the white uniforms, you know, the white stockings and the white shoes and the caps, and I thought they were just gorgeous. My name is Rhonda Little Ransom, and I'm born in Pensacola, but Tallahassee is my home site. That's what I always say. The nurses, I remember as a child, was so pleasant to us and so kind to us. This hospital for us, particularly the ones that lived in this neighborhood, was a social center.
FAMU became the first school, black or white, to have a nursing baccalaureate program in the state. These nurses, as well as the school's teachers, lawyers, and other graduates, would go on to form the foundation of the city's black middle class. Among them, the doctors who staffed the hospital.
The primary physicians were all black physicians, as I say, and there were just a few of us. And the subspecialists were the white physicians who, on call from us, would come over to do work that we didn't feel comfortable in taking care of.
Dr. A.D. Brickler is a retired obstetrician who's delivered more than 30,000 babies in his 6-decade career. That career began at the FAMU hospital.
The 5-year-old and the 6-year-old boy or little girl that wake up, that probably woke up in the 1880s, 1890s, and did not see a positive, identifiable character to model after. But in the 1950s and 60s, you started to see more of that. In the 1970s, certainly you saw someone you can identify, whether it's in your household or in your neighborhood. And now I can see that I can be something. I can contribute to society in a powerful and meaningful way.
Historically black colleges like FAMU were instrumental in the civil rights movement. In Tallahassee, FAMU students led the Tallahassee bus boycott of 1956 and the Woolworth sit-in. Their actions had an impact, and things began to change in 1964 with the passage of the Civil Rights Act. It paved the way for widespread integration.
The Civil Rights Act was supposed to be, of course, to help uplift and provide more strength and a balance, equilibrium to African Americans, opportunity.
Yet there was an unforeseen cost, and that cost was paid by black institutions.
Here's the Civil Rights Act that says separate but equal makes no sense. So we have an opportunity. If I'm a legislator that believes in oppressing African Americans, and so we have an opportunity here to use this Civil Rights Act to say, we want to take away funding if you're not serving a white population. We want to take away funding if you don't have a staff that reflects America.
FAMU began to see its programs threatened as more people began to question the need for 2 state universities in one city. Florida State University was just across the railroad tracks.
There's a law school at FAMU, you have a hospital, this flagship nursing program, researchers, and you have FSU that had none of those programs.
The first FAMU institution to close was its law school. The state defunded it in 1965, and it shuttered in 1968. Its assets went to Florida State University, the predominantly white school. 3 years later, the FAMU hospital began to face threats of closure. It lost its federal health care funding to Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, which was now integrated. And, facing financial hardship it couldn't overcome, the university hospital officially closed its doors in 1971.
Little Hospital was taking care of all of the black indigent patients and subsequently more of the white indigent patients in the community before it closed. And if you take care of a lot of sick people who don't have any money, you're going to run out of funds. And that's exactly what happened to A&M Hospital.
Everybody was heartbroken. There was so much about it we didn't understand, some we did understand. Most of the staff, somebody in the community knew somebody who worked here. We all knew somebody who was going through something as a result of the closure.
That was the beginning of what would become a 5-decade fight for survival for Florida A&M.
Here's an opportunity to consider, which became a fight later, to merge FSU and FAMU. We can close their hospital, take on their programs, take on their leading faculty, integrate some of their students who are strong academically.
Over the years, different programs were targeted for removal: nursing, agricultural sciences, even football.
So the merger of these two institutions made sense to some people, not necessarily to all. You had African Americans on both sides of the equation, especially the rising middle class.
In 2014, the reminders of loss and racial resentment embodied in the closure of the hospital and law school were again reignited when an effort to split the joint FAMU-FSU College of Engineering was unveiled in the legislature. Former State Senator Arthenia Joyner was among the last class of students to graduate from the law school before it closed.
This is different for me than anybody else here because it takes me back to a time when I sat in the stack studying and the books were removed and taken to Florida State University. I sat there as the lights were dimmed and the door closed, knowing that no other black student would have the opportunity to come to Florida A&M University because someone envisioned that it would be best at Florida State.
In that same Senate debate, former Senator Dwight Bullard noted FAMU's racial history is etched in stone, a reminder of decades of losses and struggles.
As a student at Florida A&M University, you don't know how bitter it feels for a student to pass by their library door, turn the corner, and see carved into the marble College of Law, and know that that building does not exist. You don't know how disheartening it is to go to the law library at Florida State University to study statute and see Florida A&M University stamped in the books at Florida State.
And though the battle to split the College of Engineering died on that Senate floor, it revealed wounds that never healed and injuries no hospital can treat. The FAMU community believes there are lessons to be learned in its long fight for survival.
We need to learn about our own history. It needs to be a part of our education, just as it is for other institutions.
The people that worked there were outstanding in their devotion to what they were doing. They were taking care of their people, and they were very devoted to it, but they did what they did because they wanted to contribute to the community. So that kind of medical spirit was very inspiring to me.
We had a lot of pride, and we still do, for those who remember the opening and hearing about it from our family members and experiencing it at some point. It served its purpose. It was a good place. It was a kind place.
You know, on this campus right now, there are people working in Foot Hilliard, the building where the hospital resided, that were born in that building. There was a president, the former dean of the Pharmacy School of Pharmacy, that led this university, but was also cared for in that building, and speaks to his life being saved because of the care. There are people who remember that time as being progressive and a source of pride, and speak of it proudly. And so the legacy is that I remember when FAMU had a hospital, when no other facility was available in a 150-mile radius. And it shows that FAMU was able to be a leader and can be a leader again.
FAMU is the same university that we fell in love with in 1887. FAMU yesterday, FAMU today, FAMU tomorrow, FAMU forever.
Our second retro local story is one that we first brought you back in September here on Local Roots. WFSU Public Media's Gina Jordan explores what happened to the African American community of Smokey Hollow nearly 70 years ago and how it is still influencing developments in our community today.
An old neighborhood is demolished to extend a new road in Tallahassee called FAMU Way. The improvements in a poor area near the city's historically black university are what some call progress and others call gentrification. It's a move we've seen before.
We don't take enough emphasis and put it on history, to take lessons so we can learn from what happened. And in the case of Smokey Hollow, the idea that a whole set of people were moved. Displacement really has a hardship on people. We don't understand the factors that involve, particularly when it comes to emotional trauma, when it comes to loss of spirit and loss of family and loss of support systems.
Cascades Park sits on a 24-acre parcel in the shadow of Florida's capital. Families are drawn to its ponds, imagination fountain, and pet-friendly walking trails. Long before Cascades Park was envisioned, a neighborhood known as Smokey Hollow sat in this spot. Born in the 1890s, it was home to hundreds of African-American families.
It was a community that had churches, businesses, and so you go back into the time, 50s, 60s, I'm in the 60s. Segregation was prominent. Blacks couldn't live where they so desired. So it was one of the places where blacks lived.
By the late 1950s and early 60s, the structures in Smokey Hollow were aged and many looked ramshackle. A 2-lane highway was widened into a broad boulevard, Appalachie Parkway, with a majestic view leading right up to the Capitol building and cutting right through Smokey Hollow.
A majestic sight indeed, Florida's Capitol building, with its tall white columns and glistening dome, has dominated the entire Tallahassee landscape since 1839.
To white citizens working or living up on the hill, the neighborhood looked like a slum. Urban renewal was the catchphrase of the day, according to local newspaper accounts. A possible expansion of the Capitol complex percolated with a grand vision of a campus-like array around the Capitol building. A referendum was held, and the state exercised eminent domain. Smokey Hollow residents were told to leave.
It's important for people to recognize the impact of what happens to a lot of black communities. They don't see it because it's not happening in their community. So as a result, you don't realize how many people may have lived in one of these small houses.
Smokey Hollow went under the bulldozer, ostensibly to make room for a much-needed growing Capitol infrastructure. One government office was built in the area. The Department of Transportation building broke ground in November of 1964. Time went on, and not a lot happened with the remaining land. The view approaching Florida's capital was magnificent, but the community of Smokey Hollow was gone.
So when part of my family left here, we scattered. Some went to the Bond community, some went to the South Side area, some went to North Side in the Frenchtown community, a Springfield area. And so naturally that separation caused, us to not be together as often. I still see a lot of that happening now, with families who've been displaced. Many families are homeless. That's what I think led to a lot of the homelessness from the movement of the people from this area.
Public housing projects started springing up around town as an answer to urban renewal. Smokey Hollow residents dispersed and moved to areas they could afford and were allowed. Many moved south of the railroad tracks to an area known as South City. Others went to Frenchtown, but gentrification began there in the 1990s.
We watched it in D.C., we watched it in Harlem, we've watched it all over the nation, and we're watching it in Tallahassee, Florida. We're watching communities that have been legacy communities, African-American communities, and there's a knowledge that where African-Americans dwell are some of the most valuable places in a community because we tend to be in the central of the city where accessibility is maximized because it's a need.
As FAMU Way is extended, a South City housing project is being renovated and expanded to double the living space. The area sits about 2 miles south of the old Smokey Hollow.
So early on, we were talking about urban renewal and eminent domain and, where the government could come in and take the property if they wanted to. Now we're talking about gentrification and redlining and all these things, but they're all related to certain systems, housing, wealth income, things of that sort.
Many of them have been in generational cycles of survivalism that just have not been broken. And so those are things that as a community we have to speak to and we have to own. We can't just sweep it under a rug and say, no, that's not the case. No, it is the case. The most vulnerable citizens are negatively impacted by eminent domain for the most part. So we have to be at the table when these decisions are made.
50 years after the demise of Smokey Hollow, the city of Tallahassee completed construction of Cascades Park, a beautiful public space at the site of the old neighborhood. And the Smokey Hollow commemoration stands as a reminder that things have changed, but maybe there's more work to do.
So when I think about what lessons that I've learned, I know that it's important for us to keep up on what's going on in our legislature, to keep up with what's going on in our local community government, to be a voice, which the people in Smokey Hollow didn't have much of a voice. You know, the ones who were on my side of the track, we didn't have enough to say about legislature or new things that are coming to take down a shanty family's home.
In addition to the creation of a symbolic memorial structure, as well as the preservation and display of a community gathering spot, the old barbershop, a written collection of oral histories about the Smokey Hollow community was recently published. Efforts continue to preserve the memories of Smokey Hollow, and the cycle of urban renewal continues.
We held a special screening of these retro local stories right here on FAMU's campus back in October. More than 100 people showed up to watch the videos and discuss the issues that were raised. WFSU Public Media's Devin Bittner put together these highlights from that event.
One of the things that truly surprised me about this is how consistent and how constant the arguments to merge FAMU have been since 1964.
Okay, so let's start by talking about the FAMU hospital.
Now, given that FAMU had started a hospital in 1911, so FAMU is about 40 years ahead. But all of a sudden, the funding starts to shift. And it starts to shift towards Tallahassee Memorial in the defunding of FAMU's hospital, to the degree that by 1971, it's not that the FAMU hospital was closed down, it was defunded.
When you take that opportunity away slowly but surely, and you start to tell them, no, this school across the street or this school in another part of the state is a better opportunity for you, eventually people start to believe what they hear, but they don't believe what they see.
It was Black institutions that had to merge. It was Black businesses. It was Black neighborhoods. It never went the other way. And, you know, it is sort of part of the historical record. And to your point, there is no talk about merging the other way. And there never has been.
If we could get this many people at a city council meeting, oh, it would be incredible.
You know, we can't allow families to continue to be displaced by high-level development, which the people don't even live in Tallahassee, half of them.
We need people back into the schools, back into the communities, because our children are suffering.
Dr. Ellis, Dr. Jones, Lynn Hatter with WFSU, thank you all very much. You were fantastic.
The Retro Local Project was a joint effort between WFSU TV and WFSU FM. Joining me now from the radio side is Lynn Hatter, News Director for WFSU FM, and Gina Jordan, Morning Edition host for WFSU FM. Let's talk a little bit about the process of doing these stories. How did that work? How did we choose these stories?
You know, I think some of these stories are ones that we've been thinking about before. With respect to Smokey Hollow, that's been a story that WFSU now has been covering for several years. The FAMU hospital came about a little bit differently. I'm a graduate of Florida A&M University, and when I was a student on campus, I would walk by that building every day. I knew what it was, but not a lot of people talked about it.
And so the genesis for that sort of began way early when I was still a student. The Retro Local project presented us with the ability to go a little bit beyond the normal news 3-minute, 5-minute story block and tell something that was a lot more in depth. And that is how we came up with looking at Smokey Hollow and taking a look at the FAMU hospital.
Why did you want to tell these stories? Gina?
I thought Smokey Hollow was very interesting from the standpoint that I grew up in Tallahassee and I was not familiar with Smokey Hollow. I go to Cascades Park, we see the spirit houses, we see the old barber shop, and it was interesting to me to know that a lot of families lived there and had to leave. That whole community just was decimated. And so that was an interesting piece of history for me to learn about.
What kind of responses have you had when you've been talking with people about this?
I think that people have been really receptive to this project. One of the common themes between both of these stories is one of loss and one of resilience. I think that you see that with the Smokey Hollow community. We talk a lot about the gentrification of neighborhoods. Smokey Hollow was indeed raised to support a burgeoning state government infrastructure. A lot of those families had moved from Smokey Hollow, eventually to Frenchtown, and now to Orange Avenue. Those memories go back a long way. You look at the FAMU hospital, we talk a lot about institutional loss. That was a facility that came about at a time when African Americans could not go to any other place for health care. It still stands. It has a different function now, but we know so many people here in Tallahassee who were born there. It only closed in 1971. This is only something that we're about 40 years removed from. And so there's a lot of memory, institutional memory, generational memory left in Tallahassee. People have not forgotten these things. And I think that that really resonates when you see a station acknowledging that, yes, this loss happened. Here is how these people, these institutions moved on, but yet they are still working to preserve those memories. And so that's why I really think it resonated a lot with people.
And if I could add also that a couple of things that struck me. One is that the people involved with Smokey Hollow are just grateful that the story is being told. You know, Maisha Mitchell, Sister Oak Hartsfield, they grew up there and they want people to know what happened to their community. And the other thing that struck me about the FAMU hospital story, I think it was Dr. Ed Holyfield that said, it's educational malpractice if we're not teaching the students here that this hospital was the place where a lot of Black lives were saved. It was the only place they could go to get treatment. That is the kind of thing that people are telling us they want people to learn now, because we don't want to repeat what happened before. And in fact, in some ways, we are repeating it.
And I think a lot of that institutional memory, these are people who are getting older. And if someone does not preserve that story is going to fade and it's going to die. And so a lot of this was really, I sort of viewed it as preservation work in a way, that it wasn't just, talking to my local audience, but trying to preserve a piece of Tallahassee history, as much of it as we could for as long as we can. We don't want these things to go away. We don't want them to fade. We want to keep them because they're important to our community and to the fabric of our community.
Thanks, Lynn and Gina, for taking part in this conversation. You can see more of our conversation online at wfsu.org/localroots. That's it for this special Retro Local edition of Local Roots. I'm Suzanne Smith on the campus of Florida A&M University. You can see more of our Retro Local stories on our website, wfsu.org/localroots. You can also see more behind-the-scenes stories as well. While you're online, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. For everyone at WFSU Public Media, thanks for watching. Have a great day, everyone.